Sergeant Michael Rourke had been deployed to many unforgiving places in his career, but the northern forests in winter were a different kind of hostile. They were too quiet, too vast, too old, the kind of silence that reminded him how small a man became when nature chose to erase his presence. Snow pressed against the world like thick glass, muffling the crunch of his boots even as he pushed through drifts waist-deep in spots. The trees here were skeletal and stripped bare, their branches clawing upward into a sky the color of bruised iron. Even his breath seemed unwilling to hang in the air for long. It vanished fast, stolen by cold that felt almost purposeful. His German shepherd, Titan, moved beside him with the steady confidence of a creature built for terrain Michael could barely endure. Titan's fur was rimed with frost, but his movements stayed precise, tail low, ears scanning the stillness as though listening to things far beyond human reach. Titan carried more awareness in a single step than most men did in a day. Michael trusted him without reservation. They had been sent on what headquarters insisted was a simple recovery patrol, a routine mission, a routine investigation. Just a short recon trip to verify what the satellite feeds had picked up earlier that week. Erratic radio bursts coming from somewhere deep in the restricted woods north of Base Aurora. The problem with that explanation was simple. Nothing was supposed to be there. The last active relay tower had been decommissioned 5 years earlier, shut down after a winter storm collapsed half its frame. The forest had swallowed the remains quickly, sealing concrete and rusted steel beneath layers of ice and snow. No power, no generators, no transmissions. Yet 3 nights ago, someone or something had broadcast a signal from coordinates that no longer appeared on modern maps. Strange bursts, faint whispers, and finally a voice, a human voice. Familiar, impossible. The transmission had lasted no more than 7 seconds, but those 7 seconds had dragged a cold nail down Michael's spine. Because the voice on that frequency had belonged to Corporal Alex Bryson, a soldier who had gone missing nearly 6 months earlier during a storm evacuation that had gone catastrophically wrong. Bryson had been lost, presumed dead, marked on the roster with the small black square no one liked to see. But the voice that crackled through the static had said one thing, repeated twice through distortion and interference. "Hello, Mike? Can you hear me?" No one else on the base had recognized it immediately. Many had dismissed the idea. Ghost signals, frequency bleed, atmospheric bounce. Someone else with a similar cadence. Radio illusions created by storm fronts. It happened. Rarely, but happened. Only Titan had reacted in a way that made Michael's skin prickle. The dog had snapped upright during playback, ears striking forward, hackles rising along his spine. He growled deep in his chest at a sound only he understood fully. Titan did not react to illusions. Titan reacted to truth. Now, hours into their trek, Michael felt the weight of that truth settling heavier with every step. The forest seemed to tighten around them the deeper they moved, as if trying to warn him or hide something or both. Even the wind had died, leaving the branches motionless overhead. He lifted his radio, tapping it twice out of habit, though he already knew the channel carried nothing but static. The further he traveled from base, the worse the interference became. The signal hissed softly, like a whisper trying to form words, but never quite reaching shape. "Sergeant Rourke to Base Aurora. Check in, over." Static. He waited 6 seconds. That was the standard protocol. It felt like a long time in this silence. "Base Aurora, this is Rourke. Do you copy?" More static. Titan's ears rotated backward for a moment, then forward again, tracking something far off. "You hear that?" Michael murmured. Titan didn't bark. He didn't whine. He only stared deeper into the forest, muscles tightening beneath his coat. Michael listened harder. Nothing. Only the faint drone of his own blood moving past chilled eardrums. He adjusted the strap of his pack, lifted his rifle slightly, and continued. Titan fell in a step with him instantly. The last known relay station sat another 2 miles east on the far side of a frozen creek. In summer, the area would have been nearly impassable due to thick undergrowth and wetlands. Winter had simplified the landscape, turning the marsh into crusted ice and the brush into brittle, breakable shapes. Still, the forest resisted them in subtle ways. Fallen branches snapped underfoot too easily. Snow gave way unexpectedly. The terrain fell off, like the mountain had suffered some disturbance that the human eye couldn't detect. Half an hour later, they reached the edge of the old creek. Titan stopped abruptly. Michael lowered onto one knee, running his hand over the dog's shoulders. Titan's pulse was elevated, though his breathing stayed measured. He stared across the ice. "What is it, boy?" Titan's gaze fixed on the opposite bank. Michael followed it. The trees, they were darker. Not because of shadows. The sky above was uniformly slate, giving no advantage to any particular direction. But the trees on that side looked older. Their trunks thicker, bark gnarled into deep folds. The branches thicker and twisted like forms frozen mid-movement. Snow collected unevenly on their limbs, almost as if something had brushed against them recently. Titan sniffed, then barked once. Short, focused. A signal, not a reaction. "Something crossed here," Michael said quietly. He stepped onto the frozen creek, pressing the butt of his rifle into the ice to test the strength. The layer held firm. He moved forward carefully, each step placed deliberately. Titan followed, lighter and quicker, though equally cautious. Halfway across, the radio at Michael's chest crackled softly. He froze. A burst of static whispered from the speaker. Then, "Mike!" Michael's heart slammed into his ribs. He didn't breathe. The voice came again, warped through distortion, stretched thin but unmistakably human. "Mike, come in." Michael forced his numb fingers to lift the radio to his mouth. "Bryson? Bryson, is that you?" The static sharpened into a hiss. Then, under the hiss, like something pushing against a wall of interference. "Come find me." Michael fought the chill crawling up his spine. "Where are you? Give me your coordinates." But coordinates did not come. Instead, the voice, Bryson's voice, whispered something else, a phrase Michael had not heard since the night Bryson disappeared. "They won't let me leave." The radio cut out. Michael stared into the trees across the creek, pulse hammering. Titan growled quietly, stepping closer to Michael's leg. The dog's body was tense, tail stiff and lowered. It was not fear. Titan did not fear easily. This was vigilance, a readiness for something unseen. Michael exhaled slowly, the sound shaky despite his attempts at control. "We're going," he whispered. "That's why we're here." Titan moved first, sprinting the final few feet to the opposite bank. He sniffed the ground intently, circling 3 times before stopping abruptly at a narrow trail that cut between the ancient pines. The trail wasn't natural. Snow had been disturbed and then partially recovered by wind, but Titan's nose followed something beneath the surface. A scent, a path, a direction. Michael stepped beside him. "What did you find?" Titan looked up at him, eyes sharp, then back to the trail. Michael nodded. "Lee." The dog took off, not running, but gliding forward with steady, practiced steps, his movements smooth and silent. Michael followed close behind, rifle raised. They traveled for nearly a mile before Michael noticed something strange about the forest. The trees here weren't spaced evenly like natural growth. They were arranged in lines. Perfect lines, as if planted by human hands decades ago. They formed narrow corridors through the woods, all leading toward a single direction, east. Titan slowed, ears angled sharply forward. "What now?" Michael whispered. The wind answered first, brushing past the branches overhead. Then another sound followed, subtle and hollow. Metal. Michael felt it before he saw it. A presence ahead, a structure interrupting the patterns of the forest. Titan advanced more quickly now, urgency rising in his stride. Michael tightened his grip on the rifle. The forest opened suddenly, revealing a clearing 300 yards wide. In the center stood a large concrete block, half swallowed by snow and ice. Rusted steel beams jutted from its sides, twisted and bent. A collapsed antenna tower lay in a heap nearby, its cables snarled like veins. The relay station, or what was left of it. Michael's breath caught. The structure was dead. No power, no lights, no movement. The forest had begun reclaiming it, frost creeping over the metal, roots pushing through cracks in the concrete. It's something about it radiated presence, as if the station wasn't entirely abandoned. Static hissed in Michael's radio again. Then, through the haze of interference, Mike inside, Titan barked sharply and broke into a sprint toward the entrance. Michael followed, heart pounding. The voice shouldn't exist, but it had called him, and Titan was leading him there. The entrance to the relay station loomed like the open mouth of something ancient and patient, a dark rectangle carved into a wall of concrete and frost. Titan reached it first, skidding to a halt on the icy slab in front of the doorway. His claws scraped lightly as he steadied himself, nose raised, chest expanding in deep, slow breaths. Michael approached with his rifle aimed forward, his senses shifting into the sharpened state that came from years of training layered on top of instinct. The cold air around the entrance felt heavier somehow, as if the darkness inside exhaled against the winter wind. "Wait," Michael whispered, lowering his hand to signal Titan. The dog froze instantly, one paw lifted, ears erect. Michael crouched and examined the threshold. Snow had drifted inside the doorway, but only slightly. Someone or something had been through here recently enough to disturb it. The prints were faint, softened by time and weather. A boot tread, human. Deep impressions. One set moving inward. Another set, barely visible, moving out. A few steps only. Then the outbound prints ended abruptly near the doorway's edge, as though the person had stepped into the forest and vanished. Michael stood slowly and scanned the clearing behind them, but nothing moved beyond the shiver of wind-blown snow. When he looked back at the doorway, Titan stepped forward and touched his nose lightly to the concrete wall, then to the metal frame of the door. His posture told Michael everything he needed to know. The trail led inward. "Let's go," Michael said under his breath. Titan moved first, slipping inside the dark corridor with deliberate silence. Michael followed, rifle shouldered, flashlight mounted along the barrel. When he flicked it on, the narrow beam cut through dust and floating ice particles, revealing a corridor only partly intact. The walls bore cracks like veins, frost spreading over them in delicate fractal shapes. Rusted conduits ran along the ceiling, some hanging low, threatening to snap with the slightest disturbance. The air inside felt strangely warm compared to the forest, not by much, but enough to register. Enough to unsettle him. He pressed deeper. Titan's paws made no sound on the concrete floor, his form gliding ahead like a shadow cast by something invisible. "Bryson," Michael called softly, his voice swallowed almost instantly. "If you're in here, respond." There was no reply, but the radio at his chest crackled faintly. Not a voice. Not yet. Just a soft pulse, as if something tested the boundaries of the static. Titan turned left at an intersection, pausing only to sniff before choosing a direction. Michael followed, trusting the dog's judgment over any map. The interior of the station opened into a larger chamber, perhaps once a control room. His flashlight revealed shattered panels, broken monitors, and collapsed ceiling tiles scattered across the floor. A metal chair lay on its side, half buried in debris. And something else. Michael crouched, sweeping the beam along the ground. Footprints, fresher than the ones outside. Human. The tread matched the patterns on Bryson's old tactical boots. The same type issued before the winter operation shift. Michael's chest tightened. Titan, he whispered. The dog was already tracking the scent, nose close to the floor, body tense. He followed the prints to the far side of the room, where a rusted steel hatch was half open, a wedge of darkness visible inside. Titan growled, low, controlled warning. Michael stepped closer. His breath fogged faintly, drawn instantly into the cold. He nudged the hatch further with the barrel of his rifle. It squealed softly, metal grinding. The echo carried too long, bouncing along unseen corridors, returning distorted. Beyond the hatch, a stairwell descended into deeper darkness. Michael swallowed against the tightening in his throat. If he went down there, Titan growled again. I know, Michael murmured, but we don't have a choice. He clicked on a second flashlight mounted to his vest, letting the beams overlap and strengthen. Titan descended the stairs first, muscles compact, shoulders rolling with quiet confidence, though every inch of him radiated alertness. The stairwell spiraled downward farther than Michael expected, narrow and steep. Moisture clung to the walls, dripping occasionally in slow beats that marked their descent. The air grew colder with each step. At the bottom, the stairs ended in another corridor, this one reinforced like part of an underground bunker. Graffiti coated portions of the wall, faded and ancient, remnants of those who once maintained this station before it was abandoned. Michael's radio hissed again. This time a voice formed through the static. Mike! Michael froze. Titan stopped too, glancing back at him. The voice sounded closer now, less distorted, as though Bryson, was just around the corner. Something electric thrummed in the air. Bryson, answer me. Michael pressed the transmit button, his breath catching. Are you underground? Are you injured? A beat of silence. Then, they're here. Michael stiffened. Who? Bryson, who's there with you? No response. Bryson. Static swallowed the name whole. Michael felt Titan press lightly against his leg, a grounding presence. The dog's muscles were rigid, nose lifted, ears tuned toward the corridor's deeper shadows. Michael exhaled slowly, trying to rein in the mix of dread and determination tearing at him. We keep moving, he whispered. They advanced deeper into the bunker. The corridors sloped slightly downward, leading them through a series of old blast doors and narrow hallways. Each room they passed was worse off than the last. Collapsed ceilings, coils of wire hanging like dead vines, mold frozen in intricate, ice-covered colonies along the walls. But beneath the decay, Michael sensed something else. A hum. Faint, irregular, almost undetectable. It felt like a generator struggling to power something long dead. A few minutes later, they reached the heart of the station, an operations hub surrounded by thick glass panels, most shattered. A rusted console sat in the center, its screens dark. But something beneath the floor emitted a soft vibration. Titan approached a vent panel at the far side of the room. He sniffed once, twice, then pawed at the metal. Michael stepped beside him, crouching. What is it? Titan nudged the panel again. Michael pressed his ear to it. At first he heard nothing. Then a faint sound emerged from the other side. A voice. Not words, just soft, rhythmic sobs or the ghost of them. He jerked back. Bryson. His voice cracked before he steadied it. It has to be. Titan barked once, stepping back to give Michael room. Michael wedged his fingers beneath the vent panel's edge and pulled. It resisted, rust locking in place. He repositioned, bracing one foot against the wall, and yanked harder. The metal screeched. A line of rust cracked. The panel tore free and collapsed onto the floor. Behind it, a crawl space descended at an angle, reinforced with old piping. The sound was louder now, breathing. Human. Fragile. Bryson. Michael called into the darkness. Answer. For a moment. Only silence replied. Then a whisper came back. Mike, don't come. Michael's heart punched his ribs. We're rescuing you, he said fiercely. Hold on. I'm coming down. Titan growled. Deep, instinctive, the kind of growl he used only when danger was near enough to taste. Michael hesitated, hand braced against the cold metal frame of the vent. "What is it, boy?" Titan didn't look at him. He looked down into the crawl space, his growl intensifying as his hackles rose from neck to tail. Michael leaned in again. The air drifting from below was wrong. Too warm. Metallic. Stale. Then something scraped against metal deep in the darkness. Slow. Deliberate. There was someone down there with Bryson. No, something. A new voice crackled through the radio. Not Bryson's, not human. A distorted mockery of human speech formed from static and malice. "He's ours." Michael jerked backward, pulse thundering. The radio cut out so violently it nearly sparked. Titan barked explosively, teeth bared, stance low and ready as something moved below. Not a shape. Not yet. Just the suggestion of movement. Michael steadied his rifle, aimed into the black throat of the crawl space. "Show yourself." His voice was low, lethal. Silence answered him. Then, soft footsteps echoed from below, too slow to be human, too heavy to match Bryson, too calculated to be any animal Michael knew. Something was down there. Something that could mimic voices. Something that was waiting. Michael's breath fogged in front of him as he whispered to Titan, "We're going in." Titan braced himself at the edge of the darkness, and together they descended into the shadows. The crawl space swallowed the light almost instantly, devouring the narrow beam of Michael's flashlight as though the darkness had its own hunger. Titan descended first, not hesitating despite the confined space. His body stretched low, paws finding silent purchase on the sloping metal braces. Michael followed close behind, rifle slung tight across his chest to avoid scraping the ceiling. The air smelled of iron and damp machinery, but beneath that lay another scent. Human sweat, old fear, the unmistakable salt of tears. Titan smelled it too. His muscles rippled beneath his coat, tail stiff, ears pinned forward, movements slow but certain. His instincts were screaming that something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The crawl space narrowed, then widened again, as though the structure had been built piecemeal by different crews at different times. Pipes ran along the walls, thick insulated ones, thin hollow ones, some cut clean through, others bent like something had gripped and twisted them. The old station had been neglected for years, maybe decades, and it felt like every inch of it wanted to collapse. The deeper they went, the warmer the air grew, not enough to thaw the frost on Michael's gear, but enough to make each breath feel stale and heavy. He paused at a small landing where the tunnel forked in two opposite directions. One path curved upward, leading to another set of vents. The other sloped deeper into the station's underbelly. Titan sniffed both, his nose moving in long, slow sweeps. After several seconds, he chose the right-hand path, downward. Michael's radio crackled at that exact moment. A soft breath, a broken exhale. Then, "Mike!" But this time, it wasn't the mimicry from earlier. This was a real voice. Weak, fragile, human. "Bryson," Michael breathed. "Don't come," the voice whispered again. "They'll hear you." Michael's pulse spiked. "Who?" "Bryson, who's with you?" A soft sob came through the static, raw, pained, unmistakably human. Titan pressed closer to Michael's leg, urging him forward. Michael switched channels twice, attempting to call the base, but every channel drowned in static. They were deep enough underground that the signal couldn't escape. The only link he had was the voice calling to him from somewhere ahead. They moved downward for another 20 yards until the crawl space opened into a chamber no bigger than a storage closet. A single flickering maintenance bulb buzzed overhead, powered somehow by a generator that hadn't been active when the station was abandoned. Beneath the bulb lay a steel grate covering another level of machinery. And crouched behind the grate, back pressed to the wall, knees clutched against chest, was a human figure. Michael's breath caught. "Bryson." The man flinched at his name. Slowly, Trembling, uncertain, he lifted his head. It was Bryson, but thinner, paler, eyes sunken, skin stretched tightly across his cheekbones. His hair had grown unevenly, matted in places, as though he had cut it himself with a piece of metal. His lips were cracked, his uniform torn and dirty, smeared with dried blood and grease. But he was alive, terrified but alive. Michael exhaled shakily. Bryson, Jesus Christ. The corporal blinked, as though he wasn't sure the vision in front of him was real. Mike, you shouldn't be here. His voice cracked on the last word. Titan moved slowly toward the grate, sniffing the air. Bryson recoiled, instinctively, pressing himself harder into the corner. It's all right, Michael whispered. He's with me. He's here to help. Bryson swallowed hard, voice hollow. They'll hear you. They always hear. Michael lowered his rifle slightly. Who? Bryson. Who's down here with you? Bryson didn't answer with words. Instead, he pointed, hand shaking uncontrollably, toward the far corner of the chamber. A shadow darker than the rest clung to the wall, the shape indistinct, like a coat or discarded tarp at first glance. But as Michael's flashlight swept toward it, Bryson gasped. No, don't. They don't like light. Titan barked sharply, the sound echoing off the metal walls. Michael froze. The shadow didn't move. But Bryson's terror was real. Too real. Every breath he took was shallow and panicked, his chest barely rising. Michael stepped around Titan and crouched near the grate. We're getting you out of here. Do you understand me? I'm not leaving without you. Bryson laughed, a broken, humorless whisper. I've tried. For months. Every time I move, they come. They whisper through the pipes. They know every sound in this place. You're exhausted, Michael said softly. Dehydrated. You've been trapped. You're mine. No. Bryson snapped, more forcefully than Michael expected. I'm not imagining them. You heard them too. Michael hesitated. Bryson's voice softened, defeated. Please don't treat me like I'm insane. Not after all this. Michael lowered his gaze. I'm not. I'm here. I am listening. Bryson wiped his face with a trembling hand. Something lives in the walls. Or someone. They move in the old ventilation shafts. They tap on the pipes. They whisper at night. They mimic voices, everyone's voices. Men from our unit. Family. Even my own. I don't know if they're people anymore. I don't know what happened to them, but they're not right. Titan growled, ears pinned. Michael stood slowly and approached the corner Bryson had pointed at earlier. His rifle lifted. His flashlight angled down. The shadow remained motionless. Michael crouched, reaching out a hand to touch. Titan lunged between him and the shadow, snarling. The dog's teeth flashed, his body rigid with warning. Easy, Michael said, pulling back. But Titan didn't relax. Bryson sobbed quietly. They hide. They wait. Michael studied the shadow again. It wasn't a person. Not now that he was closer. Just a tarp, half frozen, half melted against the wall. Years of condensation and frost had distorted its shape. But Titan sensed something else. Something underneath. Michael swept the wall with his flashlight. Scratches, claw marks, or fingernail marks raked across the concrete. Some old, some fresher. Whatever had caused them had tried to claw its way into the crawl space. Or out. Bryson spoke again, voice hoarse. You shouldn't have come alone. I didn't, Michael whispered, glancing at Titan. Bryson shook his head violently. No, you don't understand. One dog. One man, you won't make it out with two. We will, Michael said. I promise. But Bryson only looked at him with hollow, hopeless eyes. The eyes of a man who had spent months in darkness listening to things scrape, whisper, and move in the unseen parts of the station. Michael knelt at the grate. I'm cutting you out. Then we're getting you out of here. There's no way out, Bryson breathed. There is, Michael said firmly. I made one. Bryson didn't speak again. Michael pulled his tools from his pack, a compact cutting blade with enough power to slice through the bolts securing the grate. As he set it in place, Titan suddenly whipped his head toward the corridor behind them. His ears shot forward. His muscles coiled. A guttural growl reverberated through his chest. Michael froze. Titan. The dog moved in front of him, blocking the entrance entirely, posture low, tail stiff. Then Michael heard it. A tap. Light. Metallic. Tap, tap, tap. It echoed through the pipework overhead, moving slowly, deliberately, following the crawl space they had just used. Michael lifted his rifle. Bryson's voice broke into a whisper. They heard you. The tapping grew louder. Titan barked once, sharp, explosive, full of authority. The tapping stopped. Silence closed in around them. Michael positioned himself between Bryson and the corridor, rifle trained on the darkness. Bryson, he whispered, is there another way out of here? Bryson shook his head, sobbing. There's nowhere left to go. Titan snarled, teeth bared. A new sound drifted through the pipes. A breath. A human breath. Then a whisper that slithered through the metal like a living thing. My yike! Bryson clapped his hands over his ears and curled into a ball. It's not me, he sobbed. It's not me, it's not me. Michael's pulse hammered against his ribs. The whisper came again, this time closer. Me chael. Titan charged the darkness, snarling like a creature twice his size. Michael didn't hesitate. He grabbed the cutting blade with one hand, Bryson's trembling wrist with the other. Hold on, he hissed, voice shaking with adrenaline. Something scraped along the metal corridor, dragging itself toward them. Titan barked again, warning, challenge, defiance. Michael pressed the blade to the great bolts. There wasn't much time, but he wasn't leaving without Bryson. Not now. Not ever. And as the darkness ahead shifted with the sound of approaching steps, Michael realized something horrifying. It wasn't a monster. It was a human, but not one acting with human intentions anymore. And they were coming for all three of them. Michael's hand trembled only once, just once, before he forced himself back into full control. Titan sensed the shift instantly, adjusting his position, placing himself squarely between the darkness of the corridor and Michael's working space at the grate. The dog's body shook with suppressed fury, a deep rumble vibrating through him like a warning bell swallowed down into bone. Michael trusted Titan's instincts more than any alarm or sensor. When Titan signaled danger, it meant danger on the edge of action, danger about to erupt, danger close enough to smell. The cutting tool heated quickly, the metal warming beneath Michael's gloved fingers as it sliced through the first bolt holding the grate in place. Sparks spat softly against the steel floor. Bryson pressed his hands over his ears, knees drawn up as though trying to make himself disappear entirely. His breathing came in shallow gasps, each one sounding like he expected to be struck for taking in too much air. Bryson, Michael said carefully, voice low and steady to cut through panic without provoking him. Listen to me. I'm going to get you out of here. But you need to keep your eyes open. Understand. Bryson shook his head violently. They're coming. They always come when they hear the metal, the sparks. They live for sounds. Michael cut through the second bolt. Two left. Footsteps, soft, uneven, echoed somewhere beyond the corridor. Not one set. Multiple. Some dragging. Some light and quick. Some landing with the hollow weight of someone walking barefoot on metal. Titan snarled, lips curling, fangs bared white against the flickering light. Michael whispered, "Easy, boy, steady." But Titan wasn't calming. Titan was preparing. His hackles rose, shoulders tight, tail rigid. He stood precisely still. Only his chest moved, expanding with slow, measured breaths. This was Titan in full threat assessment mode. The same stance he had taken on the night they cornered a wounded insurgent in a collapsed building overseas. The stance he took before violence became inevitable. The footsteps grew louder, echoing from the left corridor, the right corridor, the ceiling vent above. They scraped along the old metal framework like fingernails dragged across a chalkboard. Michael's blade cut through the third bolt. The grate sagged slightly. Almost there. Then a whisper floated through the pipes. Not a mimicry of Michael's name this time, nor Bryson's. Something new. Are you here? Another voice answered it, overlapping, breathy, and broken. I hear them. I hear them. A third, trembling, childlike in tone. Is he real? Is he real? And the first whisper again, louder, closer. You followed the voice, didn't you? Michael's blood ran cold. He'd known the mimicry wasn't supernatural. He'd known it had to be human. But multiple voices meant multiple people. And the way they spoke, fragmented, layered, almost synchronized, meant they had been down here long enough to lose the boundaries of individual thought. A collective madness carved by starvation, isolation, dark, and fear. The fourth bolt gave way. Michael caught the grate before it fell, lowering it silently to avoid giving away more sound. He turned to Bryson, reaching an arm into the crawl space to pull the man out. Come on, Michael whispered. Bryson flinched backward. No, 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 no. Not through there. Not when they're moving. Michael grabbed his sleeve. You're coming out now. Bryson snapped suddenly, grabbing Michael's wrist with desperate strength. You don't understand. They're right behind you. Michael whipped around. The corridor was still empty, but the voices were moving, whispering, crawling, shifting inside the walls. Titan snapped his jaws at the darkness, barking sharply. Two shapes appeared at the far end of the left corridor, thin, hunched figures moving like they didn't fully remember how to walk upright. One crawled along the wall, fingers hooked into the rusted seams, pulling itself forward with jerking, mechanical motions. The other walked with its head tilted sideways, as if its neck no longer held properly. Their clothes were remnants of old uniforms and civilian scraps. Their hair long and tangled. Their skin pale, with the waxy translucence of people who had not seen real daylight in months or even years. Michael raised his rifle, aiming center mass. Stay back, he barked. The crawling one stopped. Its head turned toward him too slowly, like the movement scraped against something internal. Then it smiled. A thin, unnatural stretch of cracked lips, teeth visible in the dim light. Mike, it whispered in Bryson's voice. Michael's stomach twisted. The second figure stepped out of the shadows, and another pair emerged behind it. Then another, shapes gathering, watching him with huge, unblinking eyes that reflected the flashlight beam like animals. They weren't supernatural. They were human. But their humanity had been peeled back, leaving only instinct and learned mimicry, predators shaped by environment rather than nature. Michael grabbed Bryson harder. Get out. Now. Bryson sobbed. You don't know what they'll do. They come in groups, Michael said, voice steady but low. They stalk. They corner. They wait. I know. I can see it. Now move. Bryson's paralysis broke. He scrambled through the opening, collapsing onto the floor beside him. Titan moved protectively between them, barking so ferociously the walls trembled with the echo. Michael swung his pack over his shoulder, hauled Bryson up, and forced him against the far wall. Stay behind me, Michael commanded. Bryson nodded weakly, shaking so badly his teeth chattered. The figures at the end of the corridor moved again, twitching, weaving, pressing their limbs against the walls as though they needed the support. Then one of them spoke, not mimicking this time, just a raw voice, a human voice stretched thin by years of disuse. You shouldn't be here. Another voice answered, deeper, hitching with breath. No one leaves the quiet. And another, whispering almost gently. It's warm down here. It's warm. Stay warm. Michael raised his rifle, switching off the safety. I'm warning you, he said. Stay back. The figures paused. Then, in sudden unison, they stepped forward. Titan launched first, barking so loud the chamber vibrated. His body lowered, shoulders bowed, stance ready to strike. He didn't attack. Not yet, but he promised violence with every fiber of his being. Something shifted in the survivor's expressions. A flicker of hesitation. Perhaps some old instinct recognized the dog as a threat. Perhaps they remembered being afraid once, long ago. Michael used their hesitation. Go, he hissed to Bryson. They moved into the adjacent corridor. Michael kept his rifle raised, walking backward, Titan circling around his legs to stay between the threat and the path. A voice whispered from behind them. A fourth corridor. Someone else had been waiting there. Where are you going? Michael spun, nearly firing. A young woman stood barefoot in the corridor, her arms wrapped tightly around her torso. Her clothing was shredded beyond recognition. Her hair hung in tangled ropes across her face. She wasn't approaching, not yet. She simply watched, rocking gently, lips moving in tiny, soundless murmurs. Titan barked at her, swinging his head between both threats, trying to assess multiple angles. Michael pushed Bryson ahead. Move! The corridor narrowed sharply, forcing them into single file. Pipes ran along the walls, some hissing faintly with trapped air. Michael could feel the survivors following. Not running, not chasing, following with eerie calm, as though they knew the tunnels better than any map could show. They had lived here long enough to stop fearing it, long enough to become part of the place. They turned a corner and reached a service room with a half-collapsed ceiling. Support beams jutted down like broken ribs. Titan skidded to a halt, staring at the shadows overhead. Bryson's voice broke. Mike, we're trapped. No, Michael said, searching quickly with the flashlight. There's always another way. Bryson grabbed his arm. Not here. They took the exits. They sealed everything. Sealed? Michael echoed. Bryson nodded frantically. They know this place better than anyone. When they hear someone new in the walls, they cut off escape paths. They block the routes. They build traps. Sound guides them. Titan barked, once sharp. The survivors' footsteps grew louder behind them. Michael spotted another crawl space near the floor, half hidden by fallen debris. Tight fit, he muttered, but doable. I can't, Bryson whispered, backing away. I can't go back into the vents. They crawl in there. They whisper in the dark. They touch your legs. They pull hair. Michael stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. Bryson, look at me. Bryson forced his eyes upward. I will not let them take you, Michael said. But you have to move. Titan, and I will hold the line. Titan growled loudly as the survivors rounded the corner behind them. 8 or 9 now. Pale shapes shifting through the tunnel like restless ghosts, their eyes catching the flicker of Michael's light. No thinking, Michael said. Just move. Bryson dropped to his knees beside the crawl space, breath shaking. He shoved himself inside, arms trembling as he pulled forward. Titan wheeled around, positioning himself between the survivors and Michael, barking so hard saliva sparked from his jaws. Michael aimed. A figure stepped closer, an older man with sunken cheeks and hands curled like claws. Don't, the man whispered. Don't hurt us. But he stepped forward. Titan lunged with a roar, forcing the man back. Michael fired a warning shot into the ceiling. The explosion deafened the corridor. The survivors scattered for a moment, flinching from the noise. Go, Michael ordered Titan. Titan backed into the crawl space beside Bryson. Michael followed them in, feet first, rifle aimed outward until the last possible second. The survivors watched with hollow, furious hunger. They didn't scream. They didn't rush. They simply stepped closer and whispered in overlapping, trembling voices. Don't leave. Stay warm. Come back. Come back. Michael pulled himself inside, and the darkness swallowed them whole. The vent crawled downward at a shallow angle, narrowing gradually until Michael could feel the walls brushing against both shoulders at once. Titan moved ahead of him, his body lower than usual, belly nearly scraping the metal surface with each step. The dog's breaths came slow and controlled, not from fear, but from discipline. He knew noise mattered. Every bark earlier had been a calculated warning, but now he had to vanish into silence. Behind Michael, Bryson shuffled through the tight space, pushing himself with his elbows, sucking in sharp breaths whenever the metal groaned beneath their combined weight. The vent smelled of rust and old water. Condensation dripped rhythmically from overhead pipes, the sound echoing far too loudly in the cramped passage. The survivors' murmurs remained behind them, fading but not gone. Sometimes one voice rose above the others, ghost-like and breaking against the walls like a victim calling for help. Other times the whispers blended together, forming a hollow chorus that followed them even as they crawled deeper into the station's forgotten veins. Brissons chifleda sobe. Mike, we're going in circles, this vent loops. I know it does, they designed it that way. No, Michael said firmly, though sweat chilled along his spine. There's airflow. Fresh air. That means an exit. Bryson's voice broke. You said that before. Michael didn't answer. He couldn't. Not without lying. The air did move here, but weakly, like a breath struggling through constricted lungs. It told him there was a destination, but not whether it was freedom or collapse. Titan stopped suddenly. Michael halted instantly, palm braced against the cold metal floor. What is it, boy? Titan sniffed the air, then lowered his head, muscles tightening. His ears flattened, and he turned his gaze to the right side of the vent where a thin crack ran along the seam of the wall. It looked like nothing, an old structural weakness, but Titan growled low and pressed his paw against it. Bryson's breathing accelerated. No, no, no. Not that tunnel. They use that one. It's where they crawl. I've heard them scraping through there every night. We don't have a choice, Michael whispered. Behind them, a distant clang rang through the vent. Something metal fell. Then another clang, closer. Then a dragging sound. Bryson whimpered. They're in the ducts again. Michael reached past Titan, testing the seam. The panel shifted under his touch. Someone had removed it once, long ago, then replaced it without securing it properly. Titan pressed his nose to the seam and nudged more insistently. Michael pushed harder. The panel snapped free with a loud metallic pop. Bryson let out a small cry. Too loud. That's too loud. They heard that. I know they heard. We move, Michael hissed. Titan slipped into the new space first, disappearing into the dark. Michael followed quickly, dragging the panel behind him until it clicked back loosely into place, leaving no visible trail unless someone pressed hard against it. The new passage was smaller, more claustrophobic, forcing Michael to crawl entirely on his elbows. Pipes crowded the ceiling so closely that every push forward risked banging into them. Titan stayed just ahead, his tail brushing Michael's wrist occasionally, a reassurance in the suffocating dark. Bryson crawled behind them, mumbling under his breath. They'll find the opening. They always find the openings. They can smell movement in the dust. Michael ignored the rising panic. He needed to think clearly, because one mistake here wouldn't result in a fight. It would result in death by entrapment. Or worse, by being dragged backward into the dark by hands that had forgotten how to touch with human gentleness. Suddenly, Titan froze again. Michael halted. What is it now? Titan sniffed upward, then pawed at the wall. A thin, rhythmic vibration pulsed through the metal, soft but steady. Michael pressed his ear to the panel Titan indicated. A hum. A mechanical hum. Generators. There's power, Michael whispered. Somewhere above us. Bryson's voice cracked. That's the old maintenance level. They kept emergency power there, but it's unstable. It flickers, draws them in like moths. Michael exhaled. If there's power, there might be a way to signal the surface. Bryson shook violently. They won't let you. They smash electronics when they hear them. They know light. They know sound. They'll rip it apart. Michael crawled ahead. Titan. Up. The dog pawed again, harder this time. The panel above them shifted but didn't fall. A screw held in place awkwardly, bent from years of pressure. Michael twisted it with numb fingers. It groaned, then came loose. The panel dropped outward, revealing a small maintenance room lit by a single flickering bulb. Titan leapt up first, paws thudding softly on concrete. Michael climbed after him, pulling himself into the room. Bryson hesitated, whimpering softly as he reached the opening. "Come on," Michael urged. "I've got you." Bryson scrambled through, collapsing onto the cold floor and curling into himself. Titan circled the room quickly, sniffing corners, scanning shadows. His fur stood on end, not in fear but readiness. The maintenance room smelled of old oil and aging electronics. Broken tools lay scattered across a bench. A metal cabinet stood half open. A cracked mirror hung crookedly on the wall. And near the far end of the room, a panel of breakers hummed faintly with unstable current. Michael moved toward it. "Careful," Bryson whispered urgently. "They hear the humming. They sleep near the warmth." "They—" Titan's growl interrupted him. Michael stopped. Titan faced the open doorway, leading deeper into the maintenance level. His stance was rigid, his tail stiff, his entire body angled toward the dark corridor beyond. A faint patter sounded outside. Footsteps, light, unsteady, followed by a low murmur. Michael stepped silently to the side of the doorway, rifle ready. Bryson whimpered and pressed himself into the corner behind the tool bench. Titan stared fixedly at the opening. The footsteps drew closer, soft, uneven, dragging. Michael tightened his grip on the rifle, waiting for the figure to appear. Then he saw it. A hand. Thin, filthy, fingers crooked at unnatural angles. It hovered in the doorway, as if testing the air before gripping the frame. Slowly, a head peeked inside. A young man, barely 20, maybe, his hair matted, his face stripped of recognition, his eyes wide and bright like an animal. He sniffed the air, twitching slightly. His bare feet patted silently on the concrete. He didn't enter. He just stared. Titan snarled deeply. The young man shifted his gaze from Titan to Michael. Then, in a small, fragile voice, he whispered help. Michael blinked. The man didn't look like the aggressive ones. He looked broken, starved, desperate. But before Michael could respond, another voice echoed from the corridor behind the man. "No." A woman stepped into view, grabbing the young man's shoulders with bony fingers. Her nails were long and sharp. She shook her head slowly. "No talk," she whispered. "No sound." Then she looked directly at Michael, her eyes wide, unblinking, hollow. "They follow noise." Titan stepped forward with a growl. The woman flinched, pulling the young man back into the shadows. Michael raised a rifle. "Wait." But they vanished around the corner, retreating into darkness almost silently. Bryson sobbed. "They're not all violent. Some just hide, some just watch." "Doesn't matter," Michael said. "They're all unpredictable." Titan barked once, warning. The floor vibrated. Michael turned. A large grate near the ceiling began to shake. Metal buckled outward as something crawled inside the ventilation shaft above them. The sound was unmistakable, someone dragging themselves through the duct, using elbows and knees, scraping metal with bone. Then another sound emerged, a low, raspy chant, multiple voices whispering together. "No light, no light, no light." Michael grabbed Bryson. "On your feet." Bryson collapsed. "I can't." Michael hauled him up bodily. "Move." Titan. Titan barked explosively and ran to the far exit. The grate above them tore open. Hands reached through, pale, grasping. Dozens of fingers clawed the air, reaching down toward them. Michael fired a single shot, directly into the vent. Metal rang. The hands recoiled, but more were crawling closer. Michael shoved Bryson through the opposite doorway. Titan bolted past them, barking furiously, urging them forward. As Michael sprinted behind them, he heard the survivors bursting through the vent into the maintenance room, landing heavily on the floor, scrambling after them with manic desperation. They ran, down one hall, then another. Titan led, paws hammering the concrete, barking loudly now, using his voice as a weapon, a beacon, a shield. Behind them, the broken voices rose in feverish pursuit. Don't run. Stay warm. Come back. Come back. Come back. Michael didn't look back. He couldn't. All he could do was follow Titan and hope the dog knew where salvation waited. They ran until the corridors blurred, until Michael's legs burned and Bryson stumbled repeatedly, catching himself against the walls like a man trying to outrun his own shadow. Titan guided every turn with precision, sometimes racing ahead before circling back, barking to signal which direction was safest, which path held fewer threats, which tunnel hadn't yet been claimed by the voices and the broken survivors who moved through the bones of the station like restless spirits. The maintenance level twisted like a maze built without logic. Pipes ran across the ceiling in tangled networks. Many ruptured, releasing slow drips of freezing water that echoed with maddening consistency. The walls bore decades of grime, old warnings painted in chipped red letters warning of electrical hazards, pressure leaks, structural failures. Everything about the place felt dead, but the survivors had made it their ecosystem, their hunting ground, their sanctuary and prison all at once. Titan skidded to a halt at the end of a long corridor, blocking Michael abruptly. The dog's claws scraped against the concrete as he pivoted and sniffed the air sharply. His head lifted. His ears twitched. Then he growled low, a deep rumble that vibrated the narrow passage. Michael grabbed Bryson by the arm. Stay close. What is it, boy? Titan didn't move forward. Instead, he backed up 2 steps and stared at a vent overhead. The vent cover was dented. A fresh fingerprint smeared across the grime showed someone had touched it recently. A faint thud sounded from inside, something crawling, slow but deliberate. Michael swallowed. Keep moving. Now. He pushed Bryson ahead, but the young soldier hesitated, his body freezing in place. They come from above when you run, Bryson whispered. They know the routes. They know how to cut you off. Michael stared into Bryson's terrified eyes. So do we. Titan will find a way. Titan barked once, loud enough to shake dust loose from the vent. And that bark saved them. Because the moment it echoed through the corridor, a pale arm shot out between the vent slats, fingers clawing at empty air where Michael's face had been half a second earlier. The fingers were thin, bony, nails jagged and long. They snapped shut on nothing, scraping against metal with an awful screech. Bryson screamed and fell backward. Michael dragged him to his feet. Run! Titan already was, sprinting toward an intersecting hallway with explosive speed. They followed, sprinting hard as multiple hands now punched through the vent holes overhead, tearing at the slats, bending metal outward with frightening strength born of desperation. A figure dropped from one of the vents behind them, hitting the concrete with a sickening thud. It rose unsteadily, limbs twisting, neck tilting a wrong angle. It hissed a sound that might once have been a word. Titan turned and snarled, teeth bared. The figure paused, staring at the dog with animal wariness. Titan barked again, a blast of sound that made the figure reel back. Michael didn't wait to see if it recovered. He pushed Bryson onward. The corridor ahead widened into a large chamber. Giant cylindrical tanks lined the walls, old water reserves or coolant reservoirs, their surfaces frosted over. Overhead pipes hissed quietly, releasing thin plumes of vapor. The air in the chamber was warmer here, horribly warm, like stepping in a stale breath. Titan slowed, nose working furiously as he paced in front of them. What's wrong? Michael whispered. Bryson slumped against one of the tanks. They sleep here. Sometimes the warmth draws them in. Michael's stomach tightened. Titan whined softly, pressing his head against Michael's thigh. He was confused, torn between scents, between danger and direction. Easy, boy, Michael murmured. Then something moved behind the tanks. A shuffle, a breath. Michael raised his rifle instantly. Titan positioned himself between them and the sound. Bryson collapsed to the floor, covering his ears. They heard us. They heard us. They're always here. Michael's flashlight beam swayed as he aimed toward the sound. Behind the nearest tank, a figure crouched in a tight ball, arms wrapped around its legs. Pale skin, filthy hair covering the face. It rocked silently. Michael didn't lower his weapon. "Stay back," he called, voice echoing too loudly in the chamber. The figure didn't react. Titan's growl deepened. He took a step forward. Michael moved with him. The figure lifted its head slowly. It wasn't one of the aggressive ones. Its eyes were vacant, glassy, unfocused. Its lips trembled. Cold, it whispered. Michael exhaled. "We're not here to hurt you." But another voice answered from deeper in the chamber. "You shouldn't be here." Michael turned sharply. Across the room, 3 survivors stood partially hidden behind another tank. Their silhouettes were gaunt, angular, like shadows cut out from the dark. They watched silently, swaying in place as if listening to something Michael could not hear. One of them stepped forward. A man in his 50s, beard matted, skin sagging. He blinked slowly, then tilted his head. "Leave," he rasped. Another voice, higher pitched, choked out from behind him. "No light." Titan barked and lunged forward, stopping only when Michael raised a hand. The dog snarled, warning them back. Michael kept his rifle aimed. "We don't want to harm you. We're leaving." "They won't let you," the older man whispered. "Others, the ones who hunt, they smell fear. They hear footsteps. They never sleep long." Then he pointed toward a metal hatch on the far wall, almost invisible behind pipes. "There," he said. "That way." Michael aimed the flashlight. The hatch was partially rusted but intact. "Where does it lead?" he asked. The man didn't answer. He simply stepped backward into the shadows, fading into darkness with the others. Their eyes never left Michael. Titan barked again, sharp and insistent, as if confirming the direction. Michael grabbed Bryson, hauling him upright. "We're moving." Bryson stumbled, but adrenaline forced his legs into motion. They ran toward the hatch, boots slamming against concrete, breaths rasping in the tight air. A metallic thud echoed overhead. Then another. The hunters were following. Michael reached the hatch and pulled the wheel. It groaned loudly. Too loudly. Bryson screamed. "Not noise. Not noise." Michael twisted harder. The wheel gave way, and the hatch opened inward with a burst of stale air. Titan darted inside. Michael shoved Bryson through the opening. A chorus of whispers erupted behind them. "Stop! Come back! Don't leave us!" Michael stepped backward through the hatch, rifle aimed at the chamber. The survivors moved like shadows, approaching slowly. But before they could reach him, he slammed the hatch shut and spun the wheel, locking it with a harsh metallic clank. The whispers continued for several seconds, muffled through the steel. Then silence. Cold, crushing silence. Michael exhaled hard. Bryson collapsed to the floor, weeping quietly. Titan licked his hand gently, then turned his attention to the corridor ahead. Michael raised his flashlight. The new corridor sloped upward. That was good. Maybe. He stood slowly, helping Bryson to his feet. "Almost there. Hold on." Bryson wiped his eyes with shaking hands. "Where are we now?" Michael scanned the walls. Faded signs, stenciled in red, read service access level. Room 4B. Pressure control. "We're close to the surface," Michael said. Bryson laughed brokenly. So close and so far. Titan barked once, not aggressively, just to get their attention. He faced the path ahead, tail stiff, posture ridged. He sensed something new. Not danger. Not the survivors. Something else. Michael stepped beside him. "Lead," he whispered. Titan moved forward with renewed purpose, nose low, tail straight. For several minutes they climbed the sloping corridor, weaving through narrow passages and ducking beneath drooping pipes. The air changed as they moved, less stale, less heavy. Michael's ears popped slightly. They were rising. Then Titan stopped abruptly and placed his paw on a door. Michael approached it carefully. It wasn't rusted like the others. The metal was newer, reinforced. A keypad hung beside it, dark and dead without power. Michael pressed his ear to the door. Nothing, but the air flowing from beneath the seam was cold and clean. Fresh. Bryson gasped. "Mike, is that?" Titan barked sharply. "Yes," Michael whispered. "Outside." He stepped back and braced himself. "Bryson, help me." Bryson stared numbly. "I can't." "You can," Michael said firmly. "Push with me." Together, they pressed their shoulders against the door. It didn't move. They pushed harder. Titan growled and rammed his body against the lower part, adding force. The door groaned. Bryson sobbed and pushed again. Metal cracked. Light, real, natural light, bled through a slit at the top. Michael's heart slammed against his ribs. Again, they pushed with everything they had. The door burst open. Cold wind struck them, sharp and clean, slicing through the stale air of the bunker like a lifeline. Snow-covered forest stretched before them, glowing with the faint blue-gray of early dawn. They were out. They were out. Bryson collapsed to his knees, hands sinking into the snow, sobbing so hard his entire body shook. Michael looked at Titan. The dog's ears were high, his nose raised to the wind, tail lifting with cautious relief. Michael stepped into the snow. The cold no longer felt cruel. It felt like freedom. But the forest behind him was too quiet. Titan's ears twitched. Michael turned toward the open bunker door. A soft voice drifted from the darkness below. Not angry, not pleading, just lonely. "Come back." Titan growled. Michael slammed the door shut and locked it. But he knew the silence behind that door was temporary. They weren't alone in the forest. Not yet, and not entirely safe. But they were above ground. And for the first time since entering the station, Michael allowed himself a single, steadying breath of hope. Then he whispered, "Let's get to higher ground." Titan led the way, and the forest swallowed their tracks as dawn crept over the horizon. Dawn filtered through the winter forest in muted streaks of blue and gray. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a brittle layer of crusted snow that cracked faintly under each step. Titan moved ahead with measured precision, nose sweeping the air, paws sinking silently into the frost. Michael followed him closely, supporting Bryson, whose legs trembled with every uneven patch of ground. The young soldier leaned heavily on Michael's arm, breath fogging the air in short, ragged bursts. He had survived the bunker, the vents, the whispers, the hunters, but the forest held its own kind of danger. Cold, exhaustion, the possibility of being followed. Michael kept glancing behind them. No movement, no sounds, nothing but the hush of wind stirring skeletal branches. But it didn't feel empty. He trusted Titan's instincts more than anything, and Titan never let himself relax. The dog's ears flicked at every distant creak, every shifting shadow. The forest was quiet, but quiet had betrayed them before. "Keep going," Michael said softly. "We're not stopping until we find high ground." Bryson nodded weakly, but the words barely registered. The terror of the bunker clung to him like smoke. His pupils were still dilated, his hands twitching occasionally, as if expecting pale fingers to grab him from the dark behind his shoulder. Michael adjusted the grip around him and continued uphill. The trees grew denser the farther they climbed, their bare trunks rising like pillars in a forgotten cathedral. Wind cut through the branches, producing an eerie low whistle that almost sounded like a voice calling from a distance. Bryson whimpered each time the sound rose, but Titan kept them grounded. He trotted ahead confidently, tail stiff, body positioned forward, alert but without panic. After nearly an hour of climbing, the terrain narrowed into a natural ridge. Beyond it, a steep slope dropped into a frozen ravine. Jagged boulders jutted from the ice, and fallen trunks formed unstable bridges across the chasm. The only safe route was the ridge itself, a narrow spine of earth hugging the cliffside, barely wide enough for one person. Michael hesitated. Bryson groaned. "No, not there, it's too narrow." Mike, I'll fall. You won't, Michael said evenly. I'll go first. Tighten in the middle. You hold onto my belt. One step at a time. Bryson swallowed hard, eyes darting down the slope. They hate the cold, but what if they followed anyway? What if they're close? Michael tightened his grip on Bryson's shoulder. If they followed, Titan would tell us. As if on cue, Titan looked up at Michael, eyes sharp, breath steady. No fear, no urgency, just readiness. Michael exhaled a slow breath. We cross. The ridge path was more dangerous than it looked. The snow was thin here, blown off by wind, exposing slick patches of ice on the rocks beneath. Each step felt like a negotiation. Titan moved carefully, paws adjusting instinctively to the terrain. Michael followed, boots crunching against the narrow trail. Behind him, Bryson trembled violently, his grip on Michael's belt so tight it cut into the fabric. Halfway across, a sudden gust of wind slammed into them. Bryson shrieked and dropped to his knees. Michael froze. Don't look down. I already did, Bryson sobbed. I can't. I can't move. You survived the bunker, Michael said. You survived what no one else did. You can handle this ridge. Bryson pressed his forehead against the icy stone. They're still calling me. I hear them in my head. Michael knelt, steadying him with a firm grip. You hear echoes. Trauma. You're not hearing them now. But even as he said it, a faint sound drifted on the wind, a soft, distant murmur. Michael's blood ran cold. Titan's ears shot up. This wasn't wind. This wasn't the forest. A voice carried across the ridge, weak but unmistakably human. Help! Bryson's head snapped up. No, they're here. Mike, they followed. Michael forced himself not to react. Panic would kill them faster than whatever call from behind. The voice rose again, clearer this time. Come back. Titan snarled, the fur along his spine rising. Michael steadied Bryson. Move. Now. Across. Don't think. Bryson scrambled to his feet and clutched Michael's belt as though his life depended on it, which it did. They crossed the remaining stretch of ridge in silence, the forest echoing faint remnants of the voice until it finally faded. They stepped onto solid ground. Titan immediately circled them, checking the horizon, sniffing the air. He stopped and looked southeast, ears high, body angled. Michael knelt beside him. You smell something? Titan sniffed again, then pressed his paw lightly against Michael's knee. Direction. Signal. Michael's pulse quickened. Civilization. Titan huffed once. Michael helped Bryson sit against a fallen tree. Rest. Just for a minute. Bryson clutched his chest, breathing hard. They followed us. I heard them. I know that voice. It wasn't them, Michael said firmly, though he couldn't be certain. It was something else. A hunter wouldn't call for help. Bryson covered his ears. In the dark, they whispered. In events, they crawled. Maybe they learned to mimic. Titan growled softly at the mention. Michael placed a steady hand on Bryson's shoulder. Listen to me. You survived what was beneath that facility. Don't give them more power now that we're out. Their domain was underground. You're above that now. Bryson trembled, then finally nodded. They resumed traveling. The forest transformed gradually as they descended the other side of the ridge. Snow thickened. Pines replaced bare oaks. The air grew colder, sharper. Titan moved with certainty, his direction never wavering, his pace brisk but manageable for the exhausted humans behind him. Hours passed. They crossed frozen streams, climbed through tangled underbrush, and pushed into untouched stretches of forest where even deer tracks were absent. Titan's movements became more urgent. He picked up speed, sniffing the ground, then the air, then the ground again. Michael followed him closely. What do you smell? Titan barked sharply, then darted ahead out of sight. Michael's heart leapt. Titan, he sprinted, Bryson struggling behind him. They rounded a cluster of pines and stopped. A cabin stood ahead. Wooden, old, but intact. Smoke rose faintly from a chimney, dissolving into the sky. Someone was here. Someone alive. Titan waited at the front steps, tail stiff, watching the door. Bryson sagged against a tree. "We found someone. Mike, we really found someone." Michael approached slowly, rifle lowered but ready. "Hello. We need help." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened. An older man with weathered skin and white stubble stepped out, shotgun resting calmly against his shoulder. His eyes were sharp, not hostile but ready. "You two look like hell," he said. "Bring the dog in too. Storm's coming." Michael blinked. "Storm? It's clear." The man stepped aside. "Not for long. You don't want to be out here when it hits." Titan walked in first without hesitation, giving Michael instant reassurance. Dogs sense people. Titan trusted this man. That mattered more than anything. Inside, the cabin was warm. A fire crackled in a stone hearth. Supplies were neatly stacked along shelves. A radio sat on the table, old, analog, but functional. Michael eased Bryson into a chair. "Sir, we came from the abandoned research station in the valley." The man froze, then set the shotgun down quietly. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You made it out?" Michael stiffened. "You know about it. Everyone around here knows not to go near that place," the man said. "People disappear. Lights move on the wrong nights. The forest changes after storms." Titan growled softly. The man crouched beside the dog. "You saw them, didn't you?" Michael didn't answer. The man didn't need him to. "I heard your radio call," he said quietly. A voice that shouldn't have been broadcasting. "That's why I stayed awake last night. I figured someone was in trouble." Michael's breath caught. So that was it. The first whisper. The impossible signal. The thing that led them into the nightmare. "You heard it too?" Michael asked. The man nodded grimly. "But it wasn't you, was it?" Michael shook his head. "No, we didn't send anything." Bryson shuddered violently. "Then who did?" The cabin walls seemed to absorb the silence that followed. A gust of wind rattled the shutters. Titan lifted his head and growled at the window. The old man moved to the radio. If someone's still broadcasting from that facility, it's old equipment malfunctioning, or something's using it. The thought twisted Michael's stomach. Titan suddenly barked sharply. All three men turned toward the window. Outside, the forest stirred unnaturally. Shadows shifted. Branches bent though no wind blew. And then, a voice drifted through the trees. Faint, familiar, calling the same word they had heard in the vents. "Help!" Bryson screamed and covered his ears. Michael grabbed his rifle. Titan leapt to the door and snarled. The older man stepped back from the window, face pale. "They don't come this far. They never come this far." Michael's pulse hammered. He knew what this meant. The hunters had left the tunnels. They had followed. And now, they were at the cabin door. Michael positioned himself beside Titan. Bryson cried softly behind him. The old man loaded his shotgun with shaking hands. Michael whispered, "This isn't over." Titan growled, deeper than ever before. The forest answered with a whisper. "Come back." Snow fell quietly over the cabin the next morning, softening the world into muted grays and silvers. Michael stood outside beside Titan, watching the tree lean for any sign of movement. The forest looked peaceful, untouched, but peace meant little after what they had survived. The silence beneath the dawn held weight, as if the earth itself was listening. Titan's breath fogged the air in steady pulses. Each exhale a small proof of life in a world where humans had forgotten how to live beneath the cold ground. Bryson slept inside by the fire, finally breathing without the tremors that had haunted him through the night. The older man, who finally introduced himself as Hale, sat at the radio table, tuning frequencies that hadn't carried a real human voice in years. He promised to contact authorities, though both men understood what would happen next. The station would be sealed, investigated, buried again under a new layer of silence. Some conclusions were too horrifying to share openly. Titan nudged Michael's hand gently. The dog's gaze remained fixed on the forest, ears twitching at every shift of wind. He wasn't afraid. He had never been afraid, but he was watchful. A protector shaped not by fear, but by instinct and loyalty. Michael knelt and placed a hand on Titan's neck. "It's over," he whispered, though he wasn't sure he believed it. A faint hum drifted from the valley, so soft it might have been imagination, a memory of a voice that shouldn't exist. Michael looked toward the hidden entrance far below the snow. Somewhere beneath that earth, survivors still wandered. Some hunted, some whispered, some waited for footsteps that would never return. He rose slowly, Titan beside him. Whatever followed them out of that darkness had been stopped at the cabin door. But the echoes would take longer to fade. Some voices, once heard, never truly left.